Kia ora. Just over 10 years ago, the LEGO Marvel Superheroes line began with the Avengers movie in 2012. Now, 1 year later, we then had sets for the first MCU solo movie, that was Iron Man 3. This is the LEGO Marvel Superheroes Iron Man 3 Malibu Mansion Attack. It is a set based on Iron Man 3. Unlike the Man of Steel sets though, for some reason this is actually listed under the sub-theme of Iron Man 3, whereas those Man of Steel sets were just simply labelled as DCEU sets. These two lines released at the same time. I was always personally more interested in the Superman based sets. The mansion here retailed for 90 NZD, it's currently worth around 146. I paid 55 for this just this year, so I'm pretty stoked about that. The overview here is the Mandarin and his chopper, and Tony and Pepper and the mansion, or half of it, or a quarter of it. Starting off with what is the least interesting inclusion, I think, that's the Mandarin's chopper. Full disclosure, the Iron Man 3 sets compared to the Man of Steel sets, they just make shit up. I would love to deep dive into the theme at some point, because this is LEGO Marvel at its wildest for inaccuracies. The chopper feels like the standard build across multiple themes, some missiles of the flick fire kind, the color scheme feels new and pretty cool, and I like the stocky build of this, but I care not for the chopper. I care for the mansion, which most people would probably agree with me on. The most interesting build here, and one that I'm still slightly conflicted on. I hated this thing when it released. I really hated it. That's why it took me 10 years to finally decide to get it. It's got some nice details, but it's barely a facade. This is just a wall and a little bit of a floor. I was pretty confident at the time that this would be remade, but it's been 10 years and it's really not looking likely. What this set gets right is its curvature design. From the right angle, this does look like the mansion that we all know of from the movies, but it's very ugly from most of those other angles. As you've seen, the back wall here is a multicolored one because of the kitchen area sort of thing, so the greens are just left there mixed in with the colors of the mansion. The lack of a roof design also doesn't help with the shaping, but I suspect that's so you can easily access the inside of the building. This window here can blow open by pressing on this lever up top, simulating the destruction of the mansion as shown in the movie. Inside is a lot more interesting to talk about. For starters, Tony has his working station here that is on its own little swivel. It's got some pretty nice stickers of the armors that he's currently working on. You can literally see the blueprints here for LEGO's endless haul of armor sets because next to it is the armor stand. The stands here for the Marks 6 and 7, both of those minifigures were included in the Avengers line. If you have them on hand, which I did not, you can add them to the scene. Next to that area is the kitchen. I assume that this is a blender with some sort of a health drink, because I think Tony's into that kind of stuff. Green cabinets, it's a nice little area. On the back of the build, on that ugly wall we'll call it, is the feature to destroy the armor stands. I really like destruction demos like this. This is the Mark 42, controversial suit amongst the fans for the color scheme, but I kinda like it. This figure is a lot more detailed than the figures that came before this one. You'll just have to take my word for it. Underneath, the old style flip helmet is just a blank white head. The set actually encourages you to either put Tony's or Pepper's head under the helmet. I remember at the time where this was a big spoiler for the movie. But speaking of, here is the Tony Stark minifigure. He's become pretty common-ish since the release, but I always really wanted this version of him with his arc reactor under his shirt. The hairpiece looks pretty good to me. It's a brown color as opposed to the standard black that is, you know, default Tony, so this does feel a little off to me. The figure has his arc reactor in a Civ shirt, which is really great. The other Tony figures do not. He also has a scared look, which is a useful and new expression for him. Pepper Potts is a pretty good inclusion. This was her first minifigure, but it would not be her last. She reminds me a lot of that Bryce Dallas Howard figure from the Jurassic World sets. The white torso is pretty handy for some mocks, and her expressions are good as well. I like that concerned look. DUM-E is included as a brick build carrying the Mark V in its case. It's a fun inclusion. DUM-E has actually appeared a good few times in LEGO now. This is the Mandarin figure, who is my favorite of this set. We've never had a Mandarin figure since, really, or at least in this appearance that looks like a really good comic accurate design. This character really annoyed audiences at release, so even at the time it definitely felt like this was a one-time release, so I'm really happy to have him. He's got some cool expressions that feel very different from how he appears with his beard on. It just always surprises me when a head without a beard is used on a figure like this. He's got that old style cape because this was before the 2015 change. Here is the weirdest inclusion. This is the Extremist soldier. The soldiers in the movie are cannon fodder, so this isn't actually based on a particular character, at least I don't think, which is strange because you could probably count on one hand how many Extremist soldiers there are in the movie. It would have been nice if I could say that this is James Badge Dale, but whatever. His double-sided face has all these crazy red markings, and it shows that he's about to go off. I'm nostalgic for this figure only because of the LEGO Superheroes game, so I think he's cool for that. weirdest inclusion here because this figure has a pretty neat feature where he can glow in the dark. The soldiers didn't necessarily glow in the dark in the movie though, but this is less weird than the Professor Snape using it. The packaging is a pretty big box which features that really cool comic red art style that was at the beginning of the theme. The back of the box shows all of the info that I've hopefully already provided to you from this video. It included 2 instructions, one for the chopper and one for the mansion, and they have a nice blue color scheme inside. The only advertisement here is for the game, which released later in the year. The sets used to have comic books provided in each set. It was the same across all of the sets of that specific wave, but it was pretty neat of them to include. The quality is just paper, so I wish they used the same material for the cover of the instructions for these, because I can see these getting trashed really easily. The back of the comics were always the best part for the advertisements. Here they have the figures from the set. I absolutely adore the superheroes line. These just take me right back. That's my look at the Iron Man 3 Malibu Mansion set. It's a weird one that, while being based on a movie, it works better if you pretend that it's a comic-based set instead. I like the figures that are included. I like the fact that Tony's home was turned into a set, because I do think it's a pretty iconic part of the Iron Man character, but the build is barely a home. It's just far too minimal for me. Remove the chopper, raise the price a little, give me something that's a bit more substantial. Now we're talking. If you enjoyed this retrospective look at an older LEGO set, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps to support making these kinds of videos. I've got a lot more retrospective videos on the channel and more coming, so feel free to take a look. Ka kite anō, see you later.